Hello DB besties and welcome back to the Design Bundles YouTube channel. My name's Laura and if you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon because we are back here every week with all the crafty tips, tricks, and tutorials, and even tips for running your own crafty business if you're turning your hobby into a profession. Today we are doing a beginner-friendly heat transfer vinyl tutorial and we're going to be making a little Christmas-themed heat transfer vinyl shirt. I'm making mine for my daughter, but you can make it on any shirt that you want. And along the way today, we're going to be talking about 5 tips for perfecting your heat transfer vinyl crafts. So let's dive right in and jump over to materials for today, and then we'll do the computer portion of this project. Okay, let's talk about materials you need for today's project, and you really don't need that many, so this portion should be really quick. You need 4 colors of heat transfer vinyl. You can see here that I'm not even using full sheets. I have little scraps that I'm using. Well, these are kind of big scraps, but these are not even full sheets that I'm using. But if you have 4 full 12 by 12 sheets, that might be the easiest. You can do them in any color that you want, but based on our design today, I would choose some bright, vibrant colors that can be somewhat Christmassy. So I've got some green in here, as you can see. And then you're gonna need a blank to put it on. So you can put it on a tote bag, a shirt, whatever your heart desires. I'm putting it on this Gildan t-shirt in size extra, extra small for my daughter. You're also gonna need a weeding hook and some scissors, a regular grip Cricut mat, and a cutting machine of any kind. You can do today's project on a Cricut Joy, a Cricut Joy Extra, any of the Explore series, any of the Maker series, a Silhouette, literally anything. This project is for any kind of cutting machine. You will also need the cut file for today's project. I downloaded it from designbundles.net. It is included in a Plus subscription. Here it is right here for you to go find it and download it. But after you have all of those things, you are ready to go on today's project. So let's dive right into the computer part and talk about our first tip for working with heat transfer vinyl and perfecting your technique. Okay, so we are here in Cricut Design Space. We already have our file. One thing we are gonna do here in real life really quick before super jumping over to the computer is I'm going to measure the front of my shirt. This is not our first tip, this is just general practice. You do always wanna measure your blank to make sure you're working with the right amount of space. Like I'm looking here and I know I want my whole design to be a width of about 7.5 inches based off of my measurements. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do over here on the computer is highlight my whole design and change the width to 7.5. Now, when I'm doing that, I'm making sure that the proportions are locked right here so that we don't end up with a stretched or elongated design. We want it to be exactly in these proportions. But once I note that my lock is locked, I'm gonna hit enter. And now I know that my full design is exactly the size I want it to be. But the first tip I want to go over with you today is simplify your cut files. So especially when we're working with a design like this that has a lot of different pieces here. If I go and click make it and I just don't do anything else to this file, we're gonna see that we've got our little laws in various spaces. Like they're not ordered how I actually need them to be ordered to put it on my shirt. I'm gonna have to place each of these individually on the shirt and hopefully realign this exactly how we saw it in the original picture. But the Cricut is going to cut this in the most efficient way, not to waste the least amount of vinyl. It's not gonna put it exactly where I want it. So like you can see it's got these two right next to each other because it's trying to say vinyl. But if I hit cancel, I can see that really there's quite a bit of space in between those to make room for these. So this is kind of a pro and con battle that you kind of have to weigh out for yourself. But as a beginner, I always opt to have my Cricut cut it exactly as I see it here because I think rearranging it in real life and trying to get that spacing right can be really, really challenging. So if you're a beginner, I would rather waste a little bit more vinyl and know that I'm not gonna have to place these perfectly on the back end. So my first tip for you is if you're a beginner, use the attach feature in Cricut Design Space because what attach does is it allows the Cricut to cut this exactly as we see it here. So I'm gonna click my whole thing and select ungroup. Now, if I select fa and la here and I select attach, it's gonna attach those two together. And I'm gonna go do that for my pink ones. I think they might already be attached. They are. I'm gonna get all of my gold ones and attach them together. And then I'm gonna get my blue ones and attach them together. And what that's gonna do is when I go click make it, you can now see Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Fa and La have the right distance between them. Same thing with my blue ones. They have the right distance between them. They're in the right relative space. Yes, this does waste a little bit more vinyl, but you're talking about wasting an inch of vinyl and maintaining your sanity. Because when you have a design like this that comes in multiple pieces, trying to get this placed right on the back end on my shirt, if I'm having to place each individual piece, is incredibly challenging, and more than likely I'm not gonna get it close to what it looks like here, which can be really frustrating and really disappointing as a beginner when your project doesn't turn out how you want it to. So tip number one is use the attach feature to your advantage. Yes, you'll waste a little bit of vinyl, but you will keep all your hair and not turn gray prematurely because you'll have your sanity. So we're gonna use the attach feature today. Now I'm gonna go click make it, and I am working with heat transfer vinyl, so I'm gonna be mirroring every layer here, and I do wanna cut this on a mat. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for every one of my layers here, making sure to select that I'm cutting on a mat and I'm mirroring. The general rule of thumb is you mirror with heat transfer vinyl and you don't mirror with adhesive vinyl. There are some exceptions to that rule, but 99% of the time, that's gonna be a good rule of thumb for you to remember. So let's go ahead and hit continue and start making this project because the rest of our tips are gonna come later on in the process. Okay, so we've made it to this step and we're ready for tip number 2, which is my favorite little toggle in Cricut Design Space, and it is remember material settings. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the material I'm gonna be using today, which is Everyday Iron-On, and I'm gonna be using Everyday Iron-On for every single layer we cut today. So I'm gonna toggle this little remember material settings. A lot of people don't even see that it's there or skip right over it. And while it's a tiny little thing, it will save you a lot of time on the back end. Well, maybe not a ton of time, but it saves a good amount of time on the back end because now I don't have to come back to my computer between every mat that I'm loading into the Cricut, and it prevents a lot of like mistakes because the Cricut is just gonna repeatedly cut without having to replace my settings every time. If you don't have settings favorited like I do, it keeps you from having to go back through the material settings every single time you put in a new mat, and it's just gonna remember them. So tiny tip for tip number 2, but one of my absolute faves. I check this box every single time and it's just chef's kiss, my favorite. So remember material settings because we are cutting the same thing every time. Now let's load up our first mat and get to cutting. Okay, let's go ahead and load this up. I'm just gonna kind of refer back to my mat here to see how to place this really weirdly shaped piece of vinyl. Because we're using heat transfer vinyl, we're gonna place it shiny side down on our mat here. That is another kind of general rule of thumb for heat transfer vinyl that is sometimes different, but more often than not, heat transfer vinyl, shiny side down. Okay, so just kind of checking out my piece here, making sure it's oriented correctly. This is gonna work for this, so I'm gonna go ahead and load this into my Cricut and let it cut. And then I'm actually gonna go ahead and cut every piece of vinyl, and then we'll come back together for the weeding and the putting it on our shirt. If you're brand new to heat transfer vinyl, you're just gonna repeat this process for all 4 colors. So because we hit remember material settings, we don't have to do anything else on the computer. We're just gonna load this piece in and then press the flashing go button when it tells us to, which I'll show you that in a second. And then we're gonna repeat that for the next 4. We're gonna place it shiny side down, load, go, unload, repeat. Let's dive right in and get this piece cut. Okay, so I've just finished cutting all of my sheets of vinyl. So here's the next tip. This is kind of a smaller tip, but it really does go a long way. Whenever you're removing your vinyl from your mat, flip the whole thing over and peel your mat away from your vinyl, not the other way around. The other thing that I've seen a lot of people do is weed their vinyl directly on the mat, which can be really helpful with adhesive vinyl when it curls up on you. But I've found that that's not super necessary with heat transfer vinyl because if you're peeling it this way, it shouldn't be curling up on you at all. It should be pretty flat. And so if it's pretty flat, it's pretty easy to weed. The next thing we're gonna do is cut our vinyl down to size. We are gonna be wasting some vinyl today, so if that is triggering for you, just don't do it. Don't waste vinyl on yours. I'm wasting a little bit of vinyl because I want my placement to be right, like we talked about earlier. I would rather know that I've got everything in the right relative space. So I'm gonna be having some blank areas of vinyl in between when I cut here. But I am staving the rest of the sheet, cutting it as much down to size as I can while still keeping my pieces where they go. Let's go ahead and weed this project. But while we're weeding, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you my next tip, which is preheat your heat press before you start weeding so that it's ready to go when you're done weeding. So let's hop over really quick and preheat our heat press. Okay, so here is our heat press right here. We're gonna turn it on, make sure everything's connected. I'm gonna turn it to 305 degrees, and we wanna press for about 15 seconds. So we're gonna let that preheat while we weed our vinyl. Okay, our heat press is preheating, so let's go ahead and start weeding. So if you're unfamiliar with weeding heat transfer vinyl, you wanna take your hook at the edge of one of your letters or the edge of your design and slide it to the edge of your sheet, and then you can just use your finger to kind of peel it up the rest of the way. One thing that I love about heat transfer vinyl is it's much more forgiving when you're weeding than regular adhesive vinyl is. You can be pretty rough with heat transfer vinyl and it's not gonna rip, it's not gonna tear. I could pretty much just rip this thing. I just want to show you how forgiving it was. And my design is still perfectly intact. That is something to remember. I think that's one of the reasons why when I was first starting crafting and Cricut crafting, I used so much heat transfer vinyl because it's much less frustrating to work with and weed, and you're much less likely to accidentally tear something or make a mistake. All right, that's one down, 3 to go. There's actually something kind of therapeutic about weeding heat transfer vinyl, I think. 2 down, 2 to go. Voila. And we are at 260 degrees. So we're actually ready for our next step because we're almost fully preheated. So we're gonna hop back over to the heat press and round out this project with a couple more tips. Okay, we've just finished preheating. So now we're gonna do our next tip, which is preheat your shirt. So I used to think that you preheat your shirt just so that the heat transfer vinyl adheres better because it's like already hot or something. But I read online recently that preheating your shirt actually gets all the moisture out of the shirt and of course removes wrinkles, which I knew before, but I didn't know the thing about the moisture. So it is really useful and a must do for your heat transfer vinyl projects. So before I put anything else on here, I'm doing this upside down, so I'm just gonna make sure I don't burn myself first and foremost. I'm just laying my shirt out on the little pad here, kind of where I know my design is gonna go, because obviously that's the part that I care about, and sliding it back in. And now I'm just gonna press for the full 15 seconds at the full 305 degrees and let the shirt preheat. So again, this is crucial for getting moisture out, wrinkles out, and it really helps your design adhere better. So that's my next tip. And once we're done with that part, we're ready to start placing our design. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna start by placing this first piece of my design here. And we're just gonna press one at a time. I'm actually not using a Teflon sheet on this one because I'm not really doing this super hot and there aren't a million layers to work with. We're only doing 4 quick layers and we're really not pressing for that long. So I'm not as concerned about using a Teflon sheet, but if I was using a higher temperature or if I was pressing for a longer amount of time, I might use one. And when I'm peeling off, I'm just peeling slowly and as flat of an angle as I can manage. I'm also kind of referring to my design in Cricut Design Space so that I make sure everything is going in the right place as I press. That's another thing that can be a little bit challenging, is making sure you're putting everything in the right place. This can be kind of a bonus tip, but also keep in mind to look and see what your settings for your whatever brand of heat transfer vinyl you're using are. Some heat transfer vinyls are cool peel, some are warm peel, and it really just depends on what brand you're using and what kind of style you're using. So this particular one I know is warm peel, so I'm peeling this right away after I press it, but be sure to read the directions on whatever kind of vinyl you buy because some of them do require you to wait for it to cool before you peel it up. We are now on our last layer. Okay, my last tip for you before we go show off this project is to press the reverse side of your design. So after you've done everything on the front, flip over your design or flip over your shirt, your tote bag, whatever you're doing, laying it out completely flat, and do one full press on the back. This really just helps your design adhere better and gives it a little extra longevity and kind of cements everything down. I always stand by this final reverse press. Okay friends, that is the end of this project, and that was the end of our 5, maybe 6 tips for using heat transfer vinyl more effectively. I hope you love this one. I can't wait to have my daughter wear this. It's not even close to Christmas yet, but I think it's never too early for Christmas crafting. If you're not already following us, do be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon here, and follow us elsewhere at Design Bundles. We're always posting all the crafty tips, tricks, and tutorials, and we would love to hang out with you everywhere on the internet. Again, my name is Laura. You can follow me personally at It's Laura Lambert here on YouTube or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. I would love to connect with you directly. I would love to hear what you're crafting, what's inspiring you. With that being said, I hope you love this craft. I hope you get in the Christmas spirit, whatever time of year it is. Happy crafting, DB besties!